Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Hello, and welcome to the School of Love, the place where we learn about strategies and tactics to live life to its fullest. My name is Maria, and I'm doing my best to guide you in building up a life of contentment, joy, and fulfillment while applying lessons learned in school to overcome the difficulties, challenges, and insecurities of the real world. From the very beginning, I must emphasize the fact that this channel is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as motivation and inspiration outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. Together, we can build up a better tomorrow for as many of us as possible. If you are new to the channel, at this moment I would like to ask you to please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, and commenting. Thank you very, very much. This helped us not only with that mysterious algorithm which seems to dominate the YouTube galaxy, but also with contributing to the expansion of the community of humans doing their best to impact positively the world and those around them by discovering their authentic selves and living life wholeheartedly. Thanks again. With that being said, let's dive into today's topic, which is ghost in the shell. For centuries, the clear-cut separation between rationality and emotionality, or between the mind and the body, has been an open debate among intellectuals, artists, educators, and more recently among mass media influencers, politicians, entertainers. This video approaches phenomenologically the Ghost in the Shell franchise from the perspective of the annihilation of identity as soul-body dichotomy and its reunification as a harmonious entity. What started as a cyberpunk seinen manga, these are comics aimed at young male readers in Japan in 1989, written and illustrated by Masamune Shiro, born as Ota Masanori in 1961, developed gradually into a typical anime franchise. Anime being defined in its narrow understanding as a subcategory of Japanese animation with specific features such as fan service, heavy technological insinuations, a blending of temporal dimensions, ambivalent sexualization of the female body, and questionable references to masculinity, individual empowerment, and national supremacy, stretching historically from late 1970s until mid-1990s. The eponymous cult movie from 1997, directed by the likewise cult directly Oshii Mamoru, born in 1951, followed in 2004 by Ghost in the Shell 2, Innocence, under the same directorial signature, augmented in 2002 and 2020 by the television animation series Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, respectively Ghost in the Shell SAC 2045 and OVA, namely Original Video Animation Products Ghost in the Shell, a Rise Alternative Architecture, the new movie in 2015. In parallel, the video games industry took over the topic since 1997. In 2017, a live-action movie was released by DreamWorks in cooperation with Paramount Pictures and other companies under the direction of Rupert Sanders, with music by Clint Mansell and Lorne Balfe, and featuring Scarlett Johansson in the lead role. The goal of this video is to observe critically the concept of identity as displayed in the Ghost in the Shell franchise with the reformulation of the Western notion in the original Japanese script until its re-semantization in the Hollywood production. Of particular interest is the Cartesian dichotomy between mind and body and its philosophical problematization, as well as its adaptation to late modern inquiries, resulting into the unification of the two dimensions of the human being into one monolithic entity, by employing love, comprehended as self-love, in the quest for individual significance and fulfillment. The current analysis draws on extensive fieldwork in Japan and wide-ranging literature research, which allowed cross-culturally motivated comparisons. To this outcome, I proceed in 3 steps. Firstly, I succinctly analyze the animation movie Ghost in the Shell, which means literally Mobile Armored Riot Police, released in 1995 as a Japanese-British international co-production produced by Kodansha, Bandai Visual, and Manga Entertainment, and with animation provided by Production IG. It was directed by Oshi Mamoru with music by Kenji Kawai, on a script by Ito Kazunori, based on the manga publication by Shiro Masamune. For the sake of brevity and clarity, in this paper, only the animation movie from 1995 is taken into account from the Japanese franchise. Secondly, the live-action movie Ghost in the Shell from 2017 is critically observed with particular focus on the identity construction and the reverse journey of initiation pursued by the main character enacted by Scarlett Johansson. Thirdly, I wrap up in a comparative approach major elements, both common and contrasting, in the attempt to formulate an alternate theory of identity based on love as the missing link between rationality and emotionality since times immemorial. In the process of identity stylization in contemporary Japan, the female cyborg body appears simultaneously as the essence of the Japaneseness and as a chaos driving force within the traditional patriarchal order, despite her traditional feminist education, due to the powerful symbols she is loaded with. However, for the creation of a singular, univocal, autonomous identity paradigm compatible with late modern challenges, such a disturbing instance is inevitable. The disorder permanently insinuated by the female cyborg body in the tension between androgyny and recurring biological intermissions mirrors the instability and volatility of the Japanese modernity as a reputed monolith. Eventually, at the pinnacle of its spectacularly hybrid modernity, the female body is becoming what generations of male-dominated historians have debated upon: the self-conscious icon of consumption and destruction, a unique synthesis of mind as spirit and physical technological ambivalence, emblematically symbolized by the ambiguous, fascinating, and mysterious character of Kusanagi Motoko. Unlike other media versions of the Ghost in the Shell franchise, the animated movie employs a series of strategies aimed at attracting and convincing Western viewers of the credibility of the main theme. The depth of the identity problematic underneath its popularity as a question for reality shows, science fiction movies, and philosophical debates. To this outcome, a complex intellectual discourse under the pretext of the mystery plot located in the near-future Japan is constructed which compels audiences to think and feel at the same time. Moreover, the main character's detached, almost aloof attire strikes a painful chord within audiences' habit to identify with the protagonist, even more so as Major Kusanagi Motoko is openly playing with her ambivalent appearance while leading her team into fearless and to a certain degree morally dubious missions. There are essentially 2 levels on which this strategic discourse is being developed, superficially divergent, but in fact with both conducive towards the same goal: the unification of the self into a harmonious, even though complex, structure. The first level comprises human identity as a juxtaposition of rationality and emotionality. The Cartesian vision of this inner separation has been impacting the Western world and its global sphere of influence for centuries, only to be questioned by Ghost in the Shell's futurist pan-Asian landscapes of a humanity in which cyborgs and humans not only coexist, or must learn to coexist as humans are increasingly technologically enhanced, but they collide in their quest for a life worth living. This refers less to the material dimensions of existence, such as money, work, social status, family, environment, friends, and rather to the definition of life and worth living. The main character's fluid persona combines a mechanical femininity transcending the androgynously enticing body, which rejects traditional categorizations of beauty or attractiveness, and an abstract intellect which futilely searches for the boundaries between mind, soul, spirit. The climax is naturally the final battle in the Museum of Natural History, with its open display of the tree of life and of the evolution of the species and their indissoluble connection as well as reliance on each other. Reduced to a fractured upper torso and her head, Motoko confronts the puppet master and submits to his requests in a gesture of supreme love. In the immensity of the network, there are more answers than questions. Her rebirth as a doll, due to Bato's mastery, leads to the second level of artificial separations addressed in Ghost in the Shell, Kusanagi Motoko's intersectionality of femininity and cyborg. In the specific context of the animation movie and its release by mid-1990s in Japan, both femininity and cyborg stand for freedom and power as projections of an anxious, overwhelmed and directionless society. Kusanagi Motoko decisively pulverizes traditional notions of gender comprised as femininity or masculinity and human-non-human in her synthetic nature. Simultaneously, she delivers valid alternatives of freedom and power in what would turn into late modern interpretations. On the one hand, freedom is the ability of a self-sufficient, self-reliant lifestyle with full responsibility for one's choices and the consequences of those choices. On the other hand, power is the capacity to live life fully, immersed in the present moment, ready and willing to contribute to the world of self-aware of one's impact on that very world. From this perspective, freedom and power are immuably necessary parts of the late modern individual, as long as that very individual finds a way to harmoniously bring them to a common denominator. What has started as a political difficulty metamorphoses into Motoko's personal endeavor towards locating her unique self in the name of self-love. Discovering this to terms of her identity, Motoko is able to leave behind her dual structure as woman and cyborg and to unify it under the sign of the two parameters, freedom and power. Again, by mid-1990s, Japan, femininity and cyborg were the two big others, threatening to disrupt traditionally mediated visions of relentless progress, unconditional obedience, and infinite growth, all of which would prove, ultimately, unsustainable, self-destructive, meaningless. By breaking away from these two existential paradigms, and even more by elevating them to the status of alternative modi operandi, Major Kusanagi Motoko's character shows that the prevailing status quo is simply one among many ways of seeing and living life, and by no means the only way to do so. With one move of animated images and relentless sounds, the female cyborg body escapes sexualization, ignores objectification, bypasses centuries of conditioning and alienation, while simultaneously imposing fresh existential paradigms. Eventually, it is the empowered, enlightened love located in the sublime which brings all these ontological separations back into one monolithic whole, greater than its parts. The unitary, freshly solidified or resolidified self. In Kusanagi Motoko's presumably artificial intelligence resides the core of unlimited and limitless potentialities, should she choose the incommensurability of the network. In Bato's gesture of bringing her back from the incommensurability of the network, a daunting explanation, as daunting as Kawai Kenji's music, overflowing and configuring the entire animation movie, finds its way into the consciousness of audiences. In love, towards oneself and towards the others, there are answers, if one really wants to find them, equally with the unifying force which solely love can bring into existence. As to be shown later on, it is precisely this unifying force of love which drives and pushes forward the main character in the live-action movie version of Ghost in the Shell. Unlike Kusanagi Motoko in the animation movie, Mira Killian, her corresponding character in the live-action version of the Ghost in the Shell franchise, knows that she has a past as a refugee child whose parents had been killed when the boat they were on capsized in the harbor, and only she, or better said, her brain, her ghost, has survived. Later on, it turns out that these were fake memories, implemented into her cerebral setup so that her sense of justice in the name of gratitude towards those who had saved her and had given her a new life with a new beginning and a new purpose is ramped up. Again, unlike Motoko, Mira is fully aware of her past as a human, and this is the existential conclusion to which she arrives at the end of her reverse journey of initiation. Our humanity is our virtue. Finally, unlike Motoko, Mira does not take things as they come, but she asks questions, she seeks answers, she thinks for herself. To Motoko, things happen. She is passive in her expectations of what comes next and fulfills her duty without questioning its validity. Mira makes things happen. She is curious, innovative, full of initiative. She quests for the reasons beneath what she is told to do and disobeys order, even if this means to break the rules of her function. She knows she is human in a manufactured body and keeps this faith alive. Motoko does not possess this awareness. Neither is she sure of her own human origins or whether there is something left out of them in her new configuration. Nor does she really care, despite the deeply existential inquiries she finds herself pursuing. One could say that this is the major difference between Motoko and Mira. Motoko evolves very little, if at all, throughout the development of the plot, while Mira grows tremendously from a weapon, as she is initially defined by the contractors who have invested in her, to a human being, self-aware of a profound, indelible humanness covered in a highly technological shell. In accordance with Western conventions of narrative lines, it is at the end of her trajectory that Mira finds her own self and therefore turns from Mira Killian into Motoko Kusanagi. Only when the origin story of her physical presence is completely delivered, Mira's identity becomes embodied. She is suddenly less than a shell attached to a ghost, so that the ghost finds its inner equilibrium and peace. Beneath her steely, almost invincible body, those who have once loved her recognize what makes her her. Not only her mother and her cat, but also her former lover Hideo no turned Kuse. It is probably one of the most emotionally charged scenes in late modern cinema, the one towards the end of the movie in which Hideo no turned Kuse and Motoko no turned Mira lay almost fatally injured on the ground, and he looks at her with loving eyes in the midst of violent fires, as if he is trying to see beyond her new looks the young woman he once loved, and who once loved him. His last words, "I will always be with you in your ghost," are arguably among the most inspirational, aka heartbreaking, farewell words ever uttered in the history of star-crossed lovers. The hope which turns into awareness that someone might remember us with love, warmth, and respect is what makes death and separation less final, less painful, less agonizing. The words of Dr. Wille, Mira's scientific creator and a mentor-like character. We cling to memories as if they define us, but truly they do not. What defines us is what we do, metamorphose into a new credo, which has the strength to convey the essence of her future missions in the name of justice, not retaliation. Interestingly, it is in her connection and reconnection with the two mother figures in the movie, Dr. Wille, respectively her biological mother, that allows Mira to explore her identity as a human being and as a woman, something Motoko does not do. It is as if in the encounter with motherhood, symbolical or real, Mira can both acknowledge the limitations of her new life as an ultra-performant cyborg and accept them without resentment. This delivers her the inner determination to move on and to serve in the name of technology which made her possible, rather than try to revenge and destroy it. Impossible motherhood for her enhances her presence as a mass media character with a vital force of relatability through universality in an era in which childlessness as a life choice and not as a psychological or social inevitability appears to be increasingly the norm. Moreover, the mother-daughter relationship, be it symbolical as the one with Dr. Wille, who eventually sacrifices herself so that Mira can live and have a chance to a life in dignity, or be it real as the one with her biological mother once she finds her due to Dr. Wille's help, is freshly redefined in terms of hierarchy and motivations, which then inspires and motivates Mira to move forward as a complete entity. Motherly love is not so much about bringing a new little human into the world, but rather about allowing that new little human to become what he or she is meant to be, to support him or her in his or her quest for an own purpose, in his or her own exploration of the unlimited potentialities, to guide him or her through the various experiments which open unique avenues for the future. It is again a progressive vision of motherhood and more generally of parenthood, which promotes procreation in the name of progress, not in the name of self-preservation. The emergence of a new identity paradigm based on love calls for a fresh, dynamic manipulation and restructuring of emotional values, with the simultaneous fundamental reconsideration of the position of femininity within the spectrum of late modern cultures of assimilation and diversification. This dialectic handling of the self and of the other requires the re-evaluation of humanity from ruthless competition and relentless expansion towards playful togetherness and compassionate integrity. Moreover, the overcoming of the capitalist human ideal, so to say, someone who is prudently restrained in the office and wildly anarchic in the shopping mall, as Terry Eagleton has named it, and the turning of the spotlight towards more normative concerns like the integration of the individual within the community, the importance of the family, the nostalgic depiction of one's homeland, the enhancement of money and career as a means of making a living and not as an ultimate existential goal, and the moderate patriotism, however contested they might be elsewhere, gradually lead the constitution of a re-solidified identity paradigm as a self-reflexive project to harmoniously unify lucidity and courage, hard work and perseverance, honesty, respect and humility. This might be the core structure of the Homo amans, the loving human, calling for a more affectionate relationship with the self and the others. The bidimensionality of Motoko's identity, a ghost in a shell over which she has little control and of which she knows nothing whatsoever, deepens in Mira's multi-dimensional identity, which includes a past she starts to investigate, a caring mother and a real-life love story, ideals in which she used to believe in and fight for, as well as a future in which there will be many more like her, with privileges to acknowledge, responsibility to assume, and freedoms to protect. From this plurality of identities unified into a complex self, Mira emerges as a coherent structure in herself, flexible yet compact, able to employ technology as a faithful ally in humanity's effort towards further advancement of history and geography. It is a profoundly humanist faith in the skill to form alliances for mutual advantages rather than to conquer and subdue in one-sided pursuits of progress, containing the tender seeds of a worldview in which peace and affluence or at least become possible for all those involved as well as for those to come later on. The solution is, as Julia Kristeva famously put it decades ago, the subject of and in love, which has found its inner unity between its ghost and its shell. Thank you for joining me today. I am looking forward to welcoming you very soon again. Love and peace to you all.